July 1867. 3 months had passed since Ito had left the Shinsengumi, taking his men and others with him. Is there a reason? Well, the answer is actually yes, surprisingly, even though Iba is not part of the Shinsengumi. He is at least some part, sort of. Yeah, there we go. Yes, Shimada, hi.
Hi.
Okay, so we're gonna go find the others. I have to go, Shimada.
いけません。絶対に君をここから出すなと副長が仰せです。
Those demons are here for me. If anyone gets hurt, maybe they'll listen to me. That's why they're here, right? What if I could convince them to leave peacefully? Please, I'm begging you, let me go. I know that they are here for me. So if I could convince them, maybe Kazuma and the others will hear me out. Actually, we've seen this combination before. Da 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 da. Let's go. Let's go, Shimada. And then poor Shimada is thrown to the ground. Yes, hi. Yes. Hi, Kazuma. You're way too fucking close, and I need you to fucking let me go, you know? I don't want to be near you! Also, you don't know anything! You don't even know anything about the Shinsengumi situation! What was I to do? Trust the Shinsengumi. I decided long ago that I would trust them. The men of the Shinsengumi had far more experience and skill than I did. The safest thing for me to do now would be to leave the situation to them. My eyes met Harada's. They were calm, confident, and warm. Even quite literally in the grip of the enemy as I was, his gaze made me feel safe somehow. I would be fine.
門の周りにいた連中はあらかた片付きました。
I trust Harada. I will not look up. I'll tie shit. Why are you still here? Go fuck off. I will dub this scene when we do Harada's, okay? I'm not doing this one right now. I'm doing it when we get to Harada, alright? I want to redo the scene, but I just want to do it when we're doing Harada's. Because doing Kazuma just felt so fucking weird. Alright. The whole announcement of we're moving! We're being kicked out while not being kicked out entirely. Alright, so we get a new place and it's being built and we're gonna move! Courtesy of the Nishihonwanji monks. We're moving. It's not November. Oh, it's November. It's still November. November 1867. We had reached the halfway point in the month, and the weather was growing increasingly harsh as the chill became more frequent. Dusk had come after a short blustery day. Iba and Motoyama were visiting the compounds. I poured some tea for everyone. I tried my best to act with decorum as I handed each person their tea.
いやー、しかし広いですね。最初の豚書とのあまりの違いに驚きましたよ。さすがトシさんですよね。どうやって西本願寺からこれほどの条件を引き出したんです？
人聞きの悪いことを言うんじゃねえ。俺たちはあくまでも先方の行為に甘えただけだ。
Iba and Hijikata-san both smiled as they spoke. They looked like they were enjoying themselves. Here you go. I I placed a cup of tea in front of Motoyama, and he jumped slightly. Why are you afraid of me? I am the most harmless thing in here. Kind of.
ありがとう。美味しそうな茶だね。
Boy. It always seemed like Motoyama acted a little sheepishly, but he managed to smile through it.
ところで伊庭くん、今日は一体どういった用事でここに？
Ida daintily dabbed a napkin on his lips, and then he spoke quietly.
はい。ここ数日、今日の警護衆たちの様子がやけに物々しいのはなぜかご存知かと思って。
Kondo-san and Hijikata-san looked at one another, both wearing a bitter expression. Then they both sighed heavily.
土佐の坂本龍馬ってやつを知ってるか？
Iba nodded. Supposedly, Sakamoto was a charismatic influencer who was active with domains in the western region. The rumor about him even said that he was able to unite the Satsuma and Choshu together. And just recently, allegedly, he has played a large role in restoring imperial rule through the Tosa.
我々から見ると、今すぐにでも捕らえたい相手ではあるのだが。
そう簡単に行きゃ苦労しねえよ。
With regards to Sakamoto, the Shinsengumi men had been pursuing him for a while now. However, due to certain political pressures, he was considered untouchable in various parts of Japan.
しかし、坂本を狙っているのは我々だけではないからな。
だな。見回り組の連中は前に坂本に面目を潰されたらしいから相当恨んでるって聞くぜ。
なるほど。先ほど見回り組の方々がやけに殺気立っていたのはそのせいですか？
坂本も坂本で自覚があるのかないのかわざわざ幕府側を挑発するような真似をしやがるし、ありゃいっぺん切られねえとわからねえんじゃねえのか。
Iba fell silent, concentrating deeply, and then he turned to face Hijikata.
トシさん、もし坂本の所在を掴んでいるのなら教えてください。もし今彼が暗殺されるようなことになれば間違いなく大騒動になります。新選組の方が忠告しても聞き入れないでしょうから僕の方から伝えておきます。
Hijikata-san sighed and continued.
それも一理あるか。
Eventually, Hijikata-san stood up and he nodded towards Iba and Motoyama.
わかった。ついてきてくれ。一応当たりはつけてある。
はい。
わかりました。
They all stood, Motoyama rushing to get up, and they left the common room. I had hoped everything would be okay. I was putting away the cups as I turned these thoughts over in my mind. Well, I noticed the bag left where Motoyama was sitting. Kondo-san, look at this.
本山君の忘れ物かな？まだ門のところにいるはずだから持って行ってあげなさい。
Hi. I rushed and followed him in the direction Hijikata-san went. I'd found them at the entrance. Motoyama. Just as I was approaching them.
副長、見回り組の件でお知らせしたいことは。
Yamazaki, who had come running from the opposite side of me, was speaking nervously.
ちょうどその話をしてたとこだ。話してくれ。
Yamazaki seemed unsure whether or not it was appropriate to reveal his information in front of Iba or me, as he nervously glanced towards us. But he made up his mind and spoke up.
実は ここ数日見回り組が怪しげな動きを見せています。腕の立つ手勢をよりすぐっており、まるで大きな動きを起こそうとしているかのような。
大きな動きか。山崎、お前はどう見る？
Yamazaki was about to answer, then he stopped himself. He paused to think. Then he finally spoke.
おそらくは暗殺かと。それもかなりの大物を狙っているとしか思えません。
まさか。
As Iba began to realize the implications, Hichikata-san perked up and he began running. He must have been running towards the location in which Sakamoto was allegedly hiding.
雪村君、俺は局長にこのことを伝えに行く。君は副長との連絡係に。
Yamazaki gave a big gulp. Hichikata-san had already taken off running. Surely he must have realized that I couldn't possibly run after Hichikata-san alone. Iba, after watching the events unfold in front of him, offered a solution.
僕が責任を持ってこの子を守ります。トシさんのことも止めます。それが最善ですよね。
Yamazaki seemed slightly relieved that such an immediate solution came forth.
お願いします。事態は一刻を争うので。
本山、今聞いた話を各所に伝えてきてくれますか？
ああ、頼まれた。
それじゃあ行きましょう。
Aye. We looked towards one another and nodded. We were running in a direction towards which Hichikata-san had run off. My brain is slowly melting. Around us was the darkened streets of Kyo. Somehow we had found ourselves in Oumiya. But the place was filled with an assortment of people. It was so late, yet this place was still busy. I was getting a bad feeling of it all, so I spoke to a passerby to find out what was going on. Did something happen?
何でも中で切り合いがあったらしいよ。人が大怪我したとか。
Iba turned around.
あ、トシさん。
We had found Hichikata-san a little distance away, and we ran towards him.
なんだ、八郎はともかく、お前まで。まあいい。万が一の時のため、怪我の手当てができる人間がいた方がいいか。
Hichikata was muttering to himself.
トシさん、見てください。あの人確か土佐藩の。
Iba was pointing towards a group of men dressed in samurai attire. They were commanding different civilians to make way as they tried to enter the store.
お前たちはここにいてくれ。俺は中の様子を確かめてくる。
わかりました。気をつけて。
Hijikata disappeared into the Oumiya that was currently flooded with people. Oumiya, damn it, Oumiya that was currently flooded with people. We had waited in front of the store for what felt like a long while.
トシさん、遅いですね。まさか。
Iba looked as though he were growing impatient, and he cautiously gazed at the store. It had been almost 30 minutes since Hijikata-san had entered the store, but for us, it felt like an eternity. Finally, Hijikata-san had emerged from the store.
トシさん、どうでした？中の様子は？
Iba approached Hijikata-san timidly, but the latter looked very distressed. He didn't have to answer. From his silence, we could pick up the pieces of what had happened. Even though he seemed bitterly disappointed, Hijikata-san began to open up.
どうやら坂本と中岡ってやつが襲われたらしい。坂本は即死、中岡は一命は取り留めたが、あの様子だとそう長くは持たねえだろうな。
As Iba had suggested earlier in the evening, if Sakamoto were to be assassinated, then it would cause waves to ripple throughout the country. Then it must mean... Hijikata-san began giving orders while I stood there, having not the faintest idea of what to do.
俺はここに残って辺りの様子を確かめておく。長居して余計な疑いを招く気はねえが、気になることもあるからな。八郎、悪いがこいつを豚書まで連れて帰ってやってくれ。
わかりました。行きましょう。
I nodded, and together Iba and I headed back towards the compounds.
お腹空いてませんか？なんならどこかで何か食べていきましょうか。
Yeah. Now that I was thinking about it, I hadn't eaten anything since the afternoon, but I couldn't bring myself to eat right now. It seemed like Iba picked up on that much at least. Our conversation stopped and our footsteps echoed throughout the dark, empty streetways. When we reached the Kamo River, Iba stopped walking.
Sakamoto Ryomaが殺されたことで、この今日の街は大きく揺れ動くでしょう。
The sincerity of his voice, given the current circumstances, made my body tense up. It was a little painful to imagine, but I was sure that he would be right in the near future. Are we going to war? Iba didn't answer immediately. We both watched as the moonlight hid behind the thick clouds above us, and he stayed silent. I pressed on. Just like after the Ikeda Inn incident, when the Choshu attacked us. I wasn't too familiar with politics, but I felt the same anxiety now as I did back then. The Choshu became angry as a result of losing their retainer at Ikeda, so they attacked Hamaburi Gate. Then I knew something similar would happen. The uncertainty of it all made me feel so restless as we shivered in the cold Kyo evening, but Iba continued to stay silent for a moment.
状況が少し違います。あの時は長州から御所を守りきり、幕府側が勝利を収めました。
Back then? What about now? Iba seemed unsure on how he should answer. But then he decided to open up, even though his voice told me he didn't believe what he was saying.
2度目の長州征伐の失敗で幕府の権威は地に落ちています。そんな時、長州藩に攻めてくる口実を与えてしまった。そして金門の変の時は幕府側についていた薩摩藩が今度は長州の後ろ盾となり京に登ってくるはずです。
Oh look, it's spelled correctly here. It says Hamaguri. As Iba told me all of this, I became speechless. This happened so quickly. Our lives were changing. Iba sighed, as if burdened by the suddenness of these changes, and he bit his lips tenderly.
この今日は再び戦場になるかもしれません。その時、果たしてどれだけの者が戦えるのか。
His words struggled to come out, as if encumbered by blood rising through his throat. No. I was surprised to hear Iba tell me all of this, and I began to panic internally. Iba, you're an official guard of the shogunate. Why would you think in such a way? He looked like he was fighting back tears, and he simply shook his head.
逆ですよ。幕府の中にいるからこそわかるんです。長州征伐が失敗に終わったことで、徳川審判ですら幕府の力に疑いを持つところが出てきている。僕のような旗本御家人でさえ本気で戦をするなどと考えていない者も多い。今の幕府のために戦う家臣が果たしてどれほどいるか。
I didn't know what I could say to Iba. I knew this was all tough for him to admit, especially because he was a Bakushin. But even then, it must have been something that came from his gut instinct. What could I possibly say? Well, you have the Shinsengumi. I said this under the clear light of the radiant moon as it crept from behind the clouds. It seems as though my comment caught him off guard. Iba's eyes grew wide as he stared at me. I know this because I've been with the Shinsengumi after all of this time. I'm positive that they would risk all of their lives to fight this war with you. No matter what happens, I trust them to fight until the bitter end. Silence returned beside the flowing river. He looked at me with a worried expression. Then he sighed and closed his eyes for a moment.
そうですね。
Unlike earlier, this time it seemed like he was more at ease by the prospect.
確かにそうです。トシさんたちならきっと最後まで戦ってくれる。今の幕臣にはない覚悟の強さを感じられるからこそ、僕もついついあの人たちのところに足を向けてしまうのかもしれません。もちろんあなたに会いたいというのも理由の一つではありますけど。
Iba laughed momentarily, then quietly turned to face the river again.
「新選組の人たちは僕たちよりずっと武士なのかもしれませんね。」
He seemed to glow with a lot of respect as he said this, and I nodded to agree. Eventually, silence returned between us, and the only sound was the flow of the river beside us. Iba stared deeply at the moon, which at this point had inched away from the clouds and shone brightly above us, causing the river to sparkle in kind.
できるだけ早く今日を離れてください。
What did he say? His words shocked me, and I had been told to leave the Shinsengumi out of personal concern before, but this time was different. This time, these words were backed by conviction.
新選組に対する義理や行動さんのこと、いろいろな事情があるのはわかります。すぐに決めるのは難しいでしょうけど、でもできるだけ早くそうした方がいい。
Through the urgency of Iba's voice, I could sense just how much he cared about me. Of course, he had just said so himself earlier. But because he was so familiar with the internal politics of the shogunate, I knew he truly believed what he said would become of Kyo. So I should have taken him for his words, but I...
気持ちはわかります。でも今度こそ本当に命を落とすかもしれない。その時僕が守ってあげられればいいでしょうけど、そうできるとは限らないんです。以前武田さんに殺されそうになった時のことを忘れたわけじゃないですよね。
I jumped at the thought. True, what he said may have had some merit. I'm fine, okay? I said so stubbornly, hoping he'd just drop it.
何が大丈夫なんですか?
Although he wasn't raising his voice, I could still sense the coldness in his question. Perhaps he was becoming frustrated by my unwillingness to budge. Was he really irritated that I wouldn't just take his word at face value? If I get hurt, I'll just recover quickly, so I'll be fine. Suddenly, I remembered the moment in which Takeda called me a monster. Sure, I may be a little bit different from a normal human, but because of his powers, maybe I could be of some use to the Shinsengumi. Even I, without any battle experience, could do my part if the time ever came.
僕は大丈夫なんかじゃありません。
Those were not the words I was expecting to hear from him.
あなたが傷を負うぐらいなら、この身を切り刻まれる方がまだマシだ。たとえすぐに傷が治るとしても、それでいいなんて割り切れるはずがない。だから怪我をしても大丈夫なんて言わないでください。誰が何と言おうと、あなたは普通の女の子なんですから。
I could sense warmth welling in my chest as he spoke to me with such concern. I never expected him to care for me in the way he did. I'm different than a normal girl. Like Takeda had said, I guess I couldn't blame someone for thinking I'm a monster. But for Iba to see me for otherwise... Tears began to form on as my cheeks flared up. The closeness of our relationship made me blush with emotion, and the intimacy of his kindness drew me in as I watched him smile warmly. I was able to tell him a secret all those years ago that I couldn't share with anyone else, only him. I fought back the tears as I shined the brightest smile I could to let him know how much it all meant. Thank you, Iba. I felt bad that I couldn't do exactly what he had asked of me, but if something truly dangerous were to happen to me, I'll do as you say. He gave a small sigh.
まったく、あなたはよほど僕をやきもきさせたいと見える。わかりました。それじゃあ僕は幕府とあなたの両方を守ることにしましょう。
After Iba sighed, he looked up again at the moon hovering above. Shortly after, his tone became a little more cheerful.
屯所に戻りましょうか。お互いこれから大変そうですけど。
And we returned to Fudodo village. After the assassination of Ryoma Sakamoto, the Shinsengumi were facing an even bigger situation. Before November ended, the Guardians of the Imperial Tomb, which was Ito's faction, had been undergoing serious internal strife. Saito had joined the Guardians of the Imperial Tomb with the Shinsengumi's spy. And based on the intelligence report, the Shinsengumi had assassinated Ito. Bleh. The attack on the Guardians eventually became known as the Abura no Koji incident. During this incident, the demons and the Satsuma intervened, and Heisuke had suffered a critical injury during the resulting altercation. In order for Heisuke to survive, he was forced to drink the serum. At the same time, Shikage Kazuma had planned and executed a coordinated attack on the compounds. The serum, brought into the Shinsengumi by my father, was now slowly eating all of them away. My heart began sinking from the weight of it all.